Why, hello, and thank you for choosing the Vegan Luna podcast. If you came here to listen to influencers, business owners, people that are really making a change in this world and really creating some amazing ideas and amazing inventions, then you came to the right show. This show showcases some of the top people in the world that are making an impact, whether it's the environment, whether it's for health, or whether it's for the animals. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Luna podcast. I am delighted to have a very special guest all the way from the UK, and she is super inspirational to so many people. She's an ethical business coach, podcast host, and also a world champion athlete, triathlete as well. Her name is S.T.R.O.N.G. So before we jump right into getting to know S.T.R.O.N.G, we're going to ask you some quick questions, all right, to get everyone to know you a little bit more. So first question for you is, can you explain what strong means to you?
That's an interesting question, Kevin, and welcome and thank you for having me on the show. It's an absolute delight. So yeah, strong means to me, being born strong, I've had a lot of time to consider what this word means to me. And I've just sort of boiled it down to 6 key ingredients. And for me, being strong encompasses being sustainable, making sure that what I do leaves a positive impact for the environment as well as society as a whole. It's transforming. So instead of just changing things, I want to make sure when I move from where I am, it will never be the same again. It's got to be relational. I don't want to live alone. So this has to be involving other communities, other people, as well as other species. And open. Whatever I do, I make sure I do it with transparency so people can see my successes, but also my failures. So that's where open comes in. And nurturing. I want to make sure that wherever I end up, I'm as healthy as I can be. And I'm also supported and supporting as much as possible. And a big one for me as well is being goal focused, making sure I've got the end in mind and I'm not just drifting.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love the sustainability part as well. I mean, obviously it's in the beginning, because I think a lot of people forget that when you build your body, or you build your strength, or you build your, endurance, or whatever you're building for yourself, if you can't sustain that, then what's the point? You know what I mean? What's the point of being like really, really strong for 5 years of your life, but then like you just throw away 30 years, or 40 years or whatever it is. So I think the sustainability part is a really, really cool one. I like that. All right. So next question is, what made you decide to start your podcast? Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
I think it was a little similar to your journey in that about 3 or 4 years ago, I started to meet some quite inspirational people. And I felt a little selfish, to be honest, that I was meeting these high achievers, high successes, and it was just talking to myself. So I decided to start sharing these usually private conversations in my podcast. Initially, it was predominantly focused on purpose-driven businesses to prove that we can make money and do good in the world. But it has slightly shifted to encompass anyone who's striving and becoming a pioneer to do something differently, whilst also leaving a positive footprint. So yeah, it was just through conversation and wanting to make it public and bring it to people like yourself as well.
Absolutely. One thing that what I really enjoyed about like doing podcast with someone like you, or some of these amazing, like really successful people, is that I learned so much. It's almost like going to school. It's almost like I wake up, and I start recording a podcast. I start talking to someone, and this is my education. I'm learning, and I feel like I've improved myself overall. I've learned so many different things from so many different people. I've been inspired. And honestly, I actually love doing podcasts. I love talking because I've always been kind of addicted to learning. I have my own kind of issues with some of the educational system, the systems in place, especially in the US, some of the challenges they have. But beyond that, like, I'm always totally pro-education. I think people should be continuously learning. And I think that if when we stop learning, I think we stop growing. And I think that's when a lot of the, some of the negative things come into place, some of the depression and, the unhappiness and sadness and that sort of stuff can be setting in when you're not growing. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things I love about doing the podcast.
I completely agree. And we're also meeting people who are real time doing it rather than having analyzed it, researched it, but not actually taken any action. So we're speaking to the action takers of the world too, which is great.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting too, because some of the people that you talk to are are very open to sharing and more willing to give you that information. If I was just going to go sit down and say, hey, I really want to record an interview with us, I think you're really interesting, I'd probably get so many more no's than I do. But when I say, hey, I'm going to record a podcast, and I have a podcast network, I already have a channel, I already have it several episodes out, and it's on YouTube, they're more interested in sharing. They're like, you know what? I really want to share with that person the information. Whereas before, it was hard to talk to people. Now you say you got a podcast and people are willing to jump out and communicate because they know the effect. And look at the effect of just what happened with Joe Rogan in signing $100 million deal with Spotify. You've heard about that, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I think that's great news for all podcasters, great news for all content creators. I think it's a sign in a good direction for the growth of anyone that's doing this kind of work.
Yeah, definitely. And it's open to anyone. People, we don't have to be special or gifted or come from a privileged family. We just now need the gumption, a few little tools and appliances, and off we go. We can start a podcast.
And some stuff is way simpler than you think. I have a microphone and a couple extra things, but you don't need that. I can record every single thing on my phone. I can edit on my phone, and I can post it on my phone if I really want to. And it'll sound really good. It'll sound really good. And I think that's something that just is just amazing in the world we live in.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
All right, cool. So next question is, you have 3 incredibly challenging feats ahead of you that I think that not very many people have done. And I know that you had shared publicly about it, that you really want to accomplish these ones. One includes a cycle race across America. One includes the swimming across the English Channel. And another one is climbing Mount Everest. Now, these are some amazing feats. How do you plan to accomplish these?
In a simple word, step by step. One step.
or stroke by stroke.
Yeah, exactly. Or you won't be running, that's for sure, or as pedal. But it started 2.5 years ago. So my first event will be in June 2022. I'm speaking to you here in May 2020. I've been training for 4 months for it. So it's a 2.5-year full-time project, pretty much. That I need to make sure that I don't just get the physical fitness, but I also make sure nutritionally, mentally, spiritually, and every other element, really operationally, I'm all geared up to make sure I can achieve this.
Yeah, 100%. I think that, those are some of the most challenging things that you can do. And to be able to do all 3 of them is just going to be so amazing. And we'll be rooting for you all along the way. We can't wait for that to happen. And I hope that you're safe and you do everything, as safe as possible, because some of those ones are more dangerous than others, for sure. Like I did have an interview with the first vegan that climbed Mount Everest, Kuntal Joysher, and his story of climbing up Mount Everest and when he was near the top and some of the challenges that he had. One of the challenges that he had was there was an earthquake, something crazy earthquake in near Nepal or in Nepal, which is one of the sides of Everest. And he talked about how there was an avalanche and how, it was so dangerous. And he talked about how at the top of the mountain, he could see people that didn't make it. Just like he's like, that was very eye-opening and very powerful. But on the positive side, he said the very first time he did it, it was technically, in his opinion, not vegan, because at the time they hadn't been able to develop a cold weather suit that could handle those kind of elements that wasn't made from animal products. Right. So the first time he did it in a non-vegan suit because that was all that was available. He said 8 months later, he did some research. He interviewed or got connected with a company called Save the Duck. Save the Duck was able to work together with him and partner with him together to create the first ever vegan suit that could handle the elements of Mount Everest at the top. And he did another mountain, a smaller mountain, as a test. And he said, yeah, it worked great, felt awesome, and he was ready to do it. So the second time he did it was 100% vegan. So no animals were harmed in his clothing or his boots or any of the equipment that he needs to climb the mountain, which was pretty amazing.
That is really interesting, and something that I'm starting to research, because we think about what we eat, but we also forget what we wear, especially the technical equipment. They haven't actually caught up. And there's still a very old belief that leather and, down is better, but I don't believe it is. It's just we haven't got the technology that's equaling it yet. But it's only a matter of time.
There's two problems. The technology isn't there and the demand isn't there. Like there's not enough people saying, hey, I want something that doesn't have leather. I want something that doesn't have wool. And when you have those requests from people are able to create it, like that company Save the Duck. They were able to create one, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting because I ride a motorbike as well, and it took me it was almost double the investment to buy vegan leather and vegan clothes to avoid leather. But it's sometimes the cost. Why should we have to pay twice as well? But it's something we have to do if we want to stay true to our ethics and prove there's a demand for the market.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just like the way things go when something's new and there isn't a huge supply. They can't make it in bulk. It's just harder to keep those costs down, unfortunately. And like if you look at animal products, I always talk about animal products. Some people say, well, why animal products? Why do we use animals, or why do these things? It's easier. The fact is, it's easier. Animals don't complain. If you look at cows or pigs or chicken, they're pretty docile creatures. They're not likely going to attack you or harm you or hurt you. So we can oppress them and kind of do whatever we want with them, essentially. And they're going to cry, but they're not going to complain. They're not going to go to their supervisor and say, hey, someone's harassing me. Like, it's just, no, it's over. So there's also that side of it. And you could also duplicate them. You could reproduce them to have many, many more with no one's going to stop you because it's not illegal. So, so that's part of the reason that also helps drive costs down as well.
Yeah, well, hopefully with more and more people adventurous such as myself, because what's great is one of my friends summited Everest a few years ago, and we were talking about nutrition, and he's been plant-based for the last 6 months. And he says it's mostly thanks to people like myself and also another athlete called Matt Pritchard, who is vegan as well, to slowly, but without judgment, explain to him what are the benefits. And now he's 100% plant-based. So it is slowly creeping into a very meat or animal dominated industry or sport, but it will get there.
All right. So great with the questions. Awesome. The introductory questions. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm born and bred British, as I'm sure you can pick up by the slight accent. And to all intents and purposes, I was brought up as a sort of an average or normal child from a normal family. And that included, meat and 2 veg being the staple food, as well as sort of getting a safe and secure job was always what we wanted to do. Go to university, get a degree, and then get a job and retire and, have babies and get married. But I think from an early age, I've always had a question of, is this it? Is this all we're allowed to have in our life? Is there any way of breaking free from this self-imposed societal tick list, is what I call it? You've got to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend and fit this normal cookie cutter mold of lifestyle. So I didn't want to sort of break free too much because it was quite comfortable. And I think people who are comfortable have the worst type of lives because we've got nothing to fight against. We've got no reason to change. It's just average, and we can sort of float along, one day bleeding into the next. And 10 years later, we realize that we've missed all of our opportunities to live our dream life. So I think my wake-up call happened around 2012. So by that time, I'd been living that normal life. I'd got a job. I'd actually opened up my company, and I was engaged to my business partner as well as my boyfriend of 9 years. And we were living in Australia. So outwardly facing, everything was perfect. But inwardly facing, I felt like I'd given up. I wasn't myself. I was in quite a suppressed relationship, and I wasn't recognizing, who I was. And so just 6 days before our wedding, we broke up. And that, to me, was my cliff edge moment. So that's when I realized that nothing in life is secure. Nothing, I can't count on other people, should we say it like that? Nor can I predict what's going to happen in the future. And so that's the time I said, well, today's the youngest I'll ever be. Now I need to really question everything in life that I've taken for granted. And I really broke it straight back down to where where am I on my list of importance? Where can I put me first? And actually, I wasn't even on the list. Doing my job, looking after my partner, running a business, everything was ahead of myself. And so that's when I decided to start doing things for me, but consciously, with awareness. Again, something I'm very passionate about, that I talk a lot about in my podcast as well as my coaching, is we do a lot of things without asking why. Now, I don't mind what we do, but if we do it knowing what the impact is, there's a lot more power to that. And so I started to question pretty much everything I was doing with love, not judgment. And that slowly integrated into my activities. So I started to swim, cycle, and run. And I also started to question what I was eating. So I didn't have any massive diseases or illnesses. I suffered a little bit of psoriasis, my skin was itchy, I had asthma, and the usual, what I thought was usual. But we take health for granted. We assume the absence of disease is actually healthy, where in fact we're only one sneeze or one cold away from an illness. To me, health should be thriving, that nothing can impact us. We are so far away from that line, that threshold before we fall ill. So on my exploration of questioning everything I was doing, I fell upon food and started to see a really strong correlation with what I ate and how I felt. Like a really simple example is if I drank on a Thursday night, Friday morning I had a headache. It was a very obvious connection. And I started to build similar patterns with my food as well. So if I ate meat, what I noticed is I woke up the next morning sluggish, feeling a bit sticky, as well as my legs after a run were not recovering. And the more dairy I ate, the more my lungs were tight as well. So by isolating all of these foods, I know it sounds very scientific. I'm a background engineer, so it works better for me to see the numbers first. I realized that what I was eating was hurting me. And so I started to eat more that made me feel good and less that made me feel bad. And once I realized what I was eating was pretty much whole food, plant-based, and I'd also eliminated a lot of the processed gluten, so no pasta, I was eating more rice, for example. I started to then find out why, what is the backstory? And there's a plethora of really important scientific paper that proves that what I found out on a case study of one is fact. What I was eating as a normal, healthy Western diet was actually slowly killing me. And the more I looked into it, the more I knew I could never go back. And then obviously opening up my heart to being curious and the impact of others, I realized that I'd been completely ignorant and shut out what I was creating through my nutritional food. The pain of others. I'd bought into the lie I'd been told that if you live a happy life and then you're put to death to be put on my plate, that's acceptable. And the more I looked into it, I realized that on a spiritual and an ethical and an emotional level that I couldn't go back as well. So encompassing all of that, I realized I needed to focus on the positive, because not because I wanted to ignore the pain, but there's a need for the stick, the pain, and the reminder of the suppression and the problems. But we catch a lot more positivity. We make a lot more beauty with the sugar. We're all drawn to the light rather than the darkness. So I focus a lot more on the reasons why I'm doing this than I focus on why I'm not. And I think that also changes a lot more the conversations I have. More people are open to talking to me about my choices rather than feeling that I'm judging and telling them what to do.
Yeah, 100%. Why do you think that some people that grow up in the West, or not some people, most people that grow up in the West eat the way that they do and believe the things that they do and aren't really understanding so much of, healthful eating or proper nutrition or ways to thrive? They're just surviving or getting by.
Well, if we look at the relationship of foods, a lot of us, we eat for emotion reasons. Like something that when I gave up my old type of eating, I realized that when I was sad, my comfort food was was what my mum used to treat me, which involved gelatin, which involved milk, which involved the stuff that I'd actually said no to anymore. So it was very tough for me to find those anchors of emotion so that I could comfort myself. So it is going to be generational, this shift. But I think also, I mean, to be honest, we're lied to use a very harsh word. We see these beautiful images of a rolling countryside that we'd all love to visit, and this, a little cluster of happy animals jumping around, and we're not actually shown the truth. We're hidden from that. And us as consumers, we actually choose to feed the lie because it's more comfortable. We don't like feeling uncomfortable or, awkward, or, the realization that we're not as nice people as we think we are. So, it's we feed the lie. We buy into those marketing adverts. We also buy it with our dollars. So when we buy those newspapers with those adverts inside, we're telling them that they're allowed to get sponsors that way because we approve it. And so, as consumers, it just suits our lifestyle of wanting it to be easy. And that's quite harsh to say. And even as a vegan, even on every level, we do this. Because by being alive, if you want, we're imprinting the every single choice, we're leaving an impact somewhere. So it can be quite overwhelming to realize the detrimental impact we are having, but realize also taking back the power and just saying, I'll do my bit for today. So just like I'm climbing the mountain, it's one step at a time. That's all we need to focus on.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and some of the reasons why you were led to plant-based eating?
Predominantly, it was my asthma was holding me back in my sport. So as I said, I started to swim, cycle and run to recoup a little bit of my life after quite a tumultuous breakup. And I don't like putting the glass ceiling on my potential. And a lot of us are guilty in doing that. Like, we start a podcast and we'd love it to be number one, but I'll just aim for 100 people. We cap our own possibility and potential before we even start. So when I took up triathlon, because I've never done it before, I decided that I would take my potential off and see how far I could go. So to find out how far I could go and how I could be my best, I needed to aim to be the best. So I started to train to become that world champion. It sounds egocentric, but it wasn't. It was just to see if my potential was 10th, I'd find it, but I wouldn't if I aimed for 100th. So as I was training harder and harder, my lungs were holding me back. So somebody recommended me to eradicate dairy, of which I thought was very nonsensical at the time. How could what I drink hurt my lungs? But after 4 days of trialing it, I was running faster, I was running smoother. It wasn't catching in my throat. So I was breathing cleaner and not taking my pump as well. So by me striving to be my best, I started to, eradicate dairy, and meat very quickly followed thereafter. And it was my friends who found out I was vegan, because we used to eat once a month together, me and a few friends. And the time I cooked was usually a roast. But one time they came round, it was what I was eating, which was whole food. And they said, well, what are you eating now? And I listed it out. And they said, well, what do you call this? And we got my phone out and we typed it into Google, and Google said, you are now a vegan. So that's how I found out what I was. It was pure accident, but it definitely helped me towards becoming that world champion in triathlon.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's so cool. I interviewed someone that had a very similar story, and it wasn't health related, but it was like ethic related. Like, he saw some things that happen with animals and like, oh, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to, eat some of those things. And he just kind of started cutting out things out of his diet, kind of like very similarly, but he didn't have a word for it or didn't have a name for it. And it was until he was around some friends, they're like, what, are you vegan or something? He's like, I don't know what that is. And then when he Googled it, he's like, and he read the definition, and he was like, yeah, that is what I am. I don't want to harm any animals, so yeah, that does make sense, kind of like of who I am, or how I behave, I guess. So that's a really, really cool story. Can you talk about anyone that maybe inspired you, that you look up to as like a role model that does some of the things you do?
I don't really have a role model per se. What I have as a mission in life is every single person I meet has some element of gold in their life that I can learn from. So every interaction I have, I'm looking for that gold where I can sort of model it or mirror it and apply into my life. But growing into a vegan lifestyle, I turned to a lot of books. And one book that really changed my life, which I'm quite surprised because it's not a usual book I read, but it was called The Beauty Detox Solution. So it sounds very girly, sounds very diet-esque, which I am not. But she talked completely logical. She talked very sensibly. She talked about the impacts and the alternates. And it was a whole food, plant-based, raw diet as well. But that book really sort of accelerated my journey to actually see it from different angles as well. So yeah, I'd like to attribute that book.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. Can you talk about some of the sustainability issues surrounding, not eating a plant-based diet and how that can be unsustainable, maybe for people or for the planet?
Yeah, I mean, a great book for that would be Brendan Brazier's Thrive. He talks a lot about, if you think about a cow, they're pretty much a middleman. We need to grow 23 times more soya or wheat to feed the cow to give us the same equivalent of what we could have eaten 23 soya bags ago to feed the cow in the first place. But it's also the water impact. If you think about how much water it needs to take to grow the wheat, how much water the cow will need to drink as well. So environmentally, just for those two resources alone, the land and the water, it's completely crazy what we do. But then I think most of the meat we get isn't grown nearby. A lot of American meat is, I think, Southwest, grown down in, is it California? Have I got the right state?
There's a lot in California for sure. And there's a lot in the middle states. They're kind of spread out a little bit, but they're in very rural countries where still you got to transport a lot. And not all of it is coming from the US as well. A lot, Brazil is the second largest, exporter of beef.
Yeah. So, we've got to ship it or fly it. And so there's that transport, there's the oil usage. And I'm not sure where you are in the States at the moment, but we've got a lockdown. So there's been a global pandemic that's just happened, and Britain is completely 8 weeks into lockdown, meaning no ships are coming in, barely any flights are coming in. And we're running short of a lot of these staples that we thought that we grew locally, but we're actually importing. So we live in a very fragile world because of our dependency on these international luxuries. And it also falls into, vegan foods as well. I'm doing my best now to reduce my avocado intake because that's coming from abroad. So sustainability, we can look at a lot of things, not just the meat, but it's about shopping locally and buying in season and becoming more aware of that supply chain and trying to get it as small as possible.
100%. Like, I couldn't agree more. And even some of the work that I've been doing on the side, kind of like during the coronavirus lockdown pandemic, is building a lot of people gardens and stuff, building, planting fruit trees and planting lots of different fruits and veggies, so that they can eat in their own yard. They can obviously eat local, obviously, it's all organic as well. And it is plant-based because they are plants. So they're eating a lot of that sort of stuff, and it helps them in so many different ways. And especially from the sustainability part. So I totally agree. But I also know that it is challenging for some. And I think that there are some parts of the world that are a lot harder to get some things, and it can be a little bit more challenging, whether it's local or plant-based, or there are some challenges. But I think that it's always, those are often brought up by the people that aren't in those situations. The people that are in those situations don't have a way to communicate to us because they're probably not on the internet. They're probably not on podcast and Zooms. It's the ones that are like, connected to the internet or connected in the Western world that like to say, oh, but what about those people over there? And it's always like you said, we got to look within. We got to focus on ourselves. We got to focus on what can we control? Because I can't control someone in Africa, what they do or what they don't do. Like, I have no at all control, but I can control myself and kind of my actions, and I can learn more about the consequences of my own actions or the positives, of some of the actions. Yeah. So my next big question for you is, what are some of the things that you're doing to be active, whether it's active for the animals or people or the planet?
Well, what I do, as I'm sure you've noticed, I don't publicize, a lot that I'm vegan, but I do call myself plant powered. And that is I'm a professional speaker. So I always say in my bio that I'm plant powered. as part of who I am. And we were saying this just before we went live, that, I am a triathlete, I am vegan, I am an engineer, I am a girlfriend, I am a woman, I am a business owner. I'm a lot of things. I don't just highlight one of them, but in essence, I am Kate Strong. And part of me is I eat plants and fruits and vegetables, and I don't eat animals or animal products. And so I suppose as an activist, it's maybe seen as quite passive, but whenever I work in my business, I own my space with love, and I allow people to be drawn to me to ask questions. Thanks to me, doing something that no female has ever attempted in the world before, I'm getting a lot of questions in what I'm eating. And I'm crystal clear and proudly say, everything I need is from fruits and vegetables. And this is what I eat. So it's more of a show and tell rather than just a telling. And whenever I go into a business as a consultant, it's something similar. I just talk about their goals and their values. And I don't ever question their values, as in challenge them, but we find a way to integrate them to make sure that they can see along their own journey how they can slowly integrate a more sustainable, more ethical and more fair and loving part and process of their journey. So it's about giving them space. If we went to every single person tomorrow and asked them to be vegan, it couldn't happen. We don't know where they are. If they're French fries and Burger King and takeaways meals every single night, it would be too shocking for them to keep it sustainably. So I just honour where they are on their journey. And just like my friend who summited Everest a few years ago, it took him 2 years of conversation for him to, on his own, one day just try it by secret and announce it 6 months later that he's now plant-powered. So I don't know when they'll convert or if, but I'm driving them towards a more sustainable and fair methodology of living and existing.
Yeah. So can you tell us about some of the things that you're doing, like some of your competitions, some of your speaking engagements?
Yeah. Well, speaking engagements are pretty zero at the moment. I'm doing
yeah, I know, right?
I'm doing my own online summits. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I was going to say at the moment. Yeah, for sure. Because of what we're going through in the world.
Yeah, so I'm doing a few online summits. I'm getting other motivational, inspirational adventurers as well as leadership developers online just to share their message to my audience. But in October of this year, 2020, I'm intending to cycle on this bicycle behind me for 24 hours non-stop on a static, so it doesn't move. And the intention, I think, is 800 kilometers. So that would be around 500 miles, I think, or 400 miles in 24 hours. So that would be a world record. And it will be 100% televised. I usually have my table of food in front of me so people can just see the berries and bananas and the oat milks to stop the question of where the protein is, because I can go, ta-da, in front of you. And then in 2022, in June, I'm heading over to your neck of the woods. And I start in California and I'm cycling 3,000 miles in an epic race called Race Across America. And I'm training to be at least vying for first female finisher. So that will take about 10 days to cover 3,100 miles. 2 months later, I'll be swimming 21 miles from England to France in the Channel, which is going to be quite extreme because I need to put on a lot of weight for that. Because I can't do it in a wetsuit. So it'll be quite cold temperatures in the water. And then just 4 months after that, I'm slow traveling, which means I'm not catching a flight. So I'll just be traveling via train or boat or something to Nepal. And I will be training to summit Everest. So in the space of 10 months, I would have cycled America, swum the Channel and summited the highest peak in the world.
Yeah, that's just sounds like impossible when you say it out loud, but it seems even more impossible actually going to go do it. I think that is super cool. What is the training like for you? What does your training look like?
Well, at the moment, so we're 2 years away. So it's quite interesting training for such a long-term challenge. I'm just doing a lot of cycling. So I'm doing about 2 to 3 hours of cycling a day. It will increase because I do have that 24-hour challenge at the end of the year. And then next year, so 2021 is when I start open water swimming. So I need to get used to cold weather, cold temperatures. The water, is 19 degrees centigrade. So I want to say about 45, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So I need to get used to that. So I'll be looking at 9-10 mile swims most weekends, as well as cycling. But for Everest, I don't need to train until January of 2023, which is 4 months prior to summiting it, because I'll be on site. That's where I'm moving to Nepal, to also immerse myself in the culture. I love embracing the mountains, but I also love getting to know the people who actually live on the mountains. So I go there and respect the space, as well as, climb a peak and tick it off my list. I think a lot of vegans feel this, that, us humans have a sort of privileged state or privileged mindset. And it obviously shows in the species world. But I'm mindful to also honour that I am a white female in a privileged position to be able to afford these luxuries. And I make sure that along this journey, I honour the communities that I'm in with as well, to make sure that they know that I'm doing this with love and respect for what they have brought to the space to allow me to enjoy my challenges as well. So it'll be an absolutely life-changing, transforming 12 months. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. It sounds beautiful. So is there anything else that maybe you really want to add as we kind of wrap this up? Anything that you want to add that we didn't talk about, or something that you really want to reiterate that's very important, like one big thing?
I think for your audience, after having listened to a few of your podcasts, we're all, everyone who listens, I know, is very passionate. We know what we're doing and why we're doing it. Sometimes the loss in communication comes from assuming everyone comes from the same space as us. And if all we can do is bring a bit of compassion into our communication, I honestly feel that if I'm talking to myself, if I stop the judging, I know that I help a lot more people. If I actually get curious into why they've made their decisions, I'm able to contribute more. If I wait for them to ask, that's so much more powerful than me telling them what to do. So, for everyone speaking there, I know everyone's listening to your podcast is hugely, motivated in their own lives. We need to work on our language skills, and that's through communication. So just be mindful in how we're using our language and making sure that we bring compassion to it. So I'd like to end on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's so great. And I agree with you, almost 110%. I just recently read a book that was called How to Create a Vegan World. And they talked about a lot of the same things that you say is, how do you communicate to people more effectively, what works, what doesn't work. They talk about all these different things that people have done that works and these things that don't work. And they talked about something that you said a few times in this podcast is meeting people where they are. They talk a lot about that, like, where is this person? When you made the description or the analogy to someone that's eating out, getting Burger King, many times during the week, and then asking them, to make a change, or it's unfathomable. It doesn't make sense to them. To wrap this up, where can people find you if they're looking out to search for you and follow your journey?
Well, my name is Kate Strong. I'm quite Googleable. My website is katestrong.co. That's it, no M at the end. So katestrong.co. Please drop me an email. Let me know what you're doing. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well.
All right, excellent. Oh, yes, sorry, YouTube. Of course, can't forget YouTube. Awesome. Well, it was so great talking to you. You're going to inspire so many people. I can't wait for people to get a chance to listen to this. They could listen to this podcast anywhere podcasts are available, pretty much Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, all the major ones, as well as my YouTube as well, Vegan Luna. You can find that as well. All the podcasts will be there.
Wonderful. And I'll be sure to share it to my channel as well and spread the message that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that we share will totally be directed to you and the audience. So I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Take care. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Please, please, please make sure that you guys share this with anyone that you think will find this interesting. And also make sure that you guys are subscribed, because I can see a lot of you guys are listening, but you aren't subscribed. So please subscribe. And also don't forget to go to my website where you can leave comments and see more content at veganluna.com.